What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is John. Today we're taking some soil samples in our fields to see see how much fertilizer we got to put on. The soil samples, the reason we do the soil samples is to just see what the ground is lacking in as far as phosphorus, lime, calcium, which is calcium, and that depending on what our samples come back is how we justify, or how we guesstimate of how much fertilizer and what type of fertilizer we got to put on our fields, so that way we get good crops every year. So what I use is an app, and it's a free app that I downloaded. It's called Soil Sampler. It's got a little shovel icon. The Soil Sampler app does is I can set points throughout the field through an aerial view, and when I'm set, it'll set the points. You said how many samples you want to take per acre, and then you type that in, how many samples you want to take per acre, and then it'll plot you out points of the field, and you can adjust them, around to where the plots, where your points are scattered over the whole field. And then it goes off a GPS satellite. Well, once you go to start sampling the field, you can hit start sample, and then it's got a little arrow, a little icon, and you walk around with it, and it's got the points. Well, it's like a GPS, like you'd use to get to the store, or get someplace you haven't been before. Just your GPS on your phone, it'll have a little point like that, and it'll tell you how many feet away you are from the next sample point, and it'll take you to the closest sample point every time. And then you can walk to the sample point, and then when it comes up, there's a little shovel icon that'll come up on the field, or on your phone, or your tablet. You can I've got it on my tablet too, but I just use it on my phone because it's smaller and more convenient and easier to carry. But you can walk through and go to the point, and this little shovel icon will come up. You hit that little shovel icon, and it'll say dig. Well, then it'll give you the coordinates of where your plot was, where your sample was taken, and then what I use is this little homemade. This little homemade deal. Just took a piece of metal pipe that I had, took a grinder, cut a sleeve out of it, so that way I could slide my sample out. But I typically like to go about 6 inches, about 4 to 6 inches deep is usually how I take my samples. I know most samples, they usually like to go 12 inches below the surface, but I like to go 4 to 6, just because the area we're in, there's more, the deeper you go, there's more gravel, sand, and clay, and there's about 4 to 6 inches of topsoil. So I just sample the topsoil, but I just use this little homemade, like I said, this little homemade deal that I made. As you can see, it's about waist tall. I'm 6 foot, and it comes up to my waist, and it's easy for me, convenient. You're not hurting your back or anything, trying to do it. And you stick it in, twist it, you pull it out, and you can slide your sample out of it. Now I got a little plastic bucket that I use to gather my samples, and I'll put all my samples through, or all my samples that I pull out of one field, I will put in this bucket. You don't want to use a metal bucket to collect soil samples, because it'll mess up your sample. It throws it off. There's something about metal buckets, it'll throw off your sample every time, and it is not very accurate. The best thing you can use is a plastic bucket. Now I'm using just a Halloween bucket. That's just what I use. It was free. That's just what I use. But typically we use like a 5-gallon bucket or something. A plastic 5-gallon bucket would work. You just want to refrain from using anything metal to take your samples. Now, and honestly, you probably shouldn't use a metal. That's what this thing here is, metal, my sample puller. You shouldn't use a metal sample puller to pull your samples in all reality, but most of the ground we're dealing with, a plastic one ain't going to work. So you've got to have something with some oomph and that's sharp enough to dig down into the soil to take them. But so far this is what I've pulled out of the field, and that's out of three points. You need at least, for soil samples, when you take them, the place I take them to, I have a lab that does them for me. I don't do it myself. I pull the samples and then I take them to the lab, and they pull everything out and tell me everything that I need to know about that field. But when you pull your samples, got a little bit of wind blowing here. When you pull your samples, you got to have at least, to take it to the lab that I take it to, it might be different other places, but you've got to have at least a half a cup to a minimum, but they like to see more than a cup. So most of the fields I pull out of, I always say, if the field's small, like a half-acre field or something like that, it ain't very big, I'll set more plot points and I'll pull a bigger sample and do like a cup out. I know it's like what they like to see really is for every like few acres, a cup of sample, and you sample out. Like this field we're standing in now is it's 7.5 acres, so really, with the way this field is laid out, I'm just kind of getting an overall. That's the reason why I'm turning in one sample per field, just to kind of get the overall average of what I got to put on. A little cheaper on fertilizer, but to do it right on this field, I really ought to turn in 4 or 5 different samples on the one field. But with us not planting with GPS and fertilizing with GPS and spraying with GPS and all that stuff that everything all the modern guys use, it's kind of, I don't really need to do that. It's just more costly for me, and it's worked out for me just getting the overall field average. And my crops do pretty good, so far in the past my crops have done pretty good doing it. They could do better, but they could have done a lot worse. So I don't feel like it's, I'm doing too bad by doing it this way, and I'm also saving money. So we'll walk through. I got my wife running the camera today. I'm gonna have her carry the bucket for me, and I'm gonna pull out my phone and we'll figure out where our next sample point is, and I'll go show you guys how to pull a sample. We walked past that point. We're going to go ahead and go on to the next one. The app that I use is not super accurate, but it's accurate enough for what I'm doing. So yeah, bear with me for a minute. Okay, my little shovel icon got pulled up. So right here is where we're going to do the sample. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to knock back all the fodder and grass, and just like the top, just a toe kick, and I'm going to center that up. The less foreign matter you have in your sample, the better. I'll stick that straight in, twist it up, make sure I got a good core, pull it out, and that right there is what you'll have. See, that's blacker dirt. That's pretty good soil. But then we're just going to scrape it out. A lot of times, if it won't come out with just using your thumb or finger, this ground is pretty soft. We've had non-stop rain for the last couple of weeks, so the soil's pretty soft. But I've got my little multi-tool, and what I'll do if it's too hard to get out, I'll just take that, stick that in there, and scrape it right off. So that works out pretty good too, and I keep it in my back pocket. Just we'll be here for another couple of hours pulling samples, so I'm not going to bore you with all the walking that we're doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all this here finished up, finish taking my samples, and then I'll show you how I label them, and I'll show you, stay tuned, and I'll show you how to dry them out. The most efficient way I found to dry out your samples, you don't want them too dry, but you don't want them sopping wet when you take your samples in, because they'll charge you like a drying fee, because your samples have got to be dried to a certain point for the lab that I use anyway, to be able to do the samples and do the all the tests and stuff they got to run on them. So bear with me for a little while, and I'll show you how to dry them out and how I bag them. So now that we've got our samples, got our samples collected, I keep a little bag, keep all my stuff in, just makes it easier. You can go and get these little bags at wherever you're taking your soil samples, and these little bags filled up here, they got a line. That's usually 9 out of 10, that's usually where you got to fill them, and that's about a half a cup is what that equals when you fill this bag up. And it's got instructions on the back too to help you out. But what I use is one of them little twist tie sandwich bags. You can use one of them, or use whatever, or you use any kind of a baggie, just anything plastic. And then after you get your sample, what you want to do is just mix it up, bust up the clumps, clods, everything in it. If there's any foreign matter that you come across, just pull it out of there. You mix it up real good, well, got an even mix in it. And then what I've got here, just got one of them little solo cups, and I got it marked there, measured it out, half a cup, and there's a cup at that line. I always dump it out before I bag it, before I leave the field, just to make sure that I've got enough for my sample. I usually do. Now that I've got that cup completely full, so I've got about a cup and a half in there. Oh, losing my stuff. Take that, dump it in there, and then you'll want to compress it and get all the air out of it that you can. You're not going to get it perfect, but it's the reason I like using these bags, because I can scrunch it and twist it up. And I use these little sandwich bag ties that come with these. Twist it up real tight, make sure it's real tight, so that way no air can get in, nothing can fall out of it. And then take your notepad, and whenever you got your field called, see, this here was this is the field I called 4 acres in the back. Take your ink pen, you bust a little hole in it, and then when you go down, take your bags out to dry them, you've got them coated. Twist that up there, boom. Soil sample's done for now. It's ready for transport out of the field. We've got our samples that we took earlier. Now I'm going to show you how I dry them out and get them to where they need, or get them to the moisture they need to be to take them in. You want a little bit of moisture left in the samples, but you don't want them as wet as they are, or as these are anyway. You just want to dry them out. You don't want them till they're a dust, but you don't want you'll be able to tell when you feel the soil after you dry it. Like, you want a little bit of moisture left in it, but you don't want it sopping wet. So what I do is I lay out a clean board in the and usually I just put it up against our garage door, our shop. Fixing my mic here. You got the, like I said, get a relatively clean board. I mean, it don't have to be, spotless, but you don't want anything to where, there's going to be any residue on it whenever you take your samples. And then I use just got a space heater. I put a space heater on it and put the space heater far enough away to where you don't catch anything on fire. I've got probably 6-7 feet between there, but the heat will hit the back of the door, and it'll just kind of circulate right here where I want it to dry on our soil samples. So I'll get a bag dumped out here, one of our little bags. I'm gonna get it dumped out and kick the space heater on and dry them. So we got our samples. Getting ready to dump it out here. Take our ID tag off. That way we know what field this bag belongs to. And go on, who tied this thing? As you can see here, when I dump this out, you can see all the clumps, all the big clumps in it. What you want to do is try to just break some of them up the best you can, and you just want to spread it out just like that. There's still going to be a bunch of clumps in it, but as you dry it out, you'll be able to crumple those up a lot better. This soil that I took, this sample here that I took off our farm that we're cash renting, it's pretty wet up there. But as I stated earlier, it's rained for almost a week straight, so this is the first sunny day we've had for a while that we've been able to do anything. You stand back here. So we're going to plug our space heater in. I get a cord here. Drying, you'll want to push down on it. As it's drying, you'll want to kind of push down on the clumps and just kind of break them up a little bit. Not like as I'm doing here, just keep it spread out to where everything dries evenly. All them big clumps that we had are now gone. A little bit of smaller clumps is okay. Any foreign matter you come across, you'll want to toss out of the sample. And you just want to kind of keep working it, so that way everything dries evenly. lot of people, whenever they do their soil samples, they don't do this. They don't dry it out. This is something that I do for the lab that I take my samples to. They like it to be dried out a little bit, because if it's not dried out to a certain point, they'll charge you a little bit more for the sample. What they want is that they want the soil as natural as it can coming out of the dirt, basically as if we haven't had any rain for a week. So not drought conditions, but not 5 inches of rain conditions. So I've got it dried out here.
After you get your sample dried out, you'll want to put it back in the same bag that you transported it from the field to wherever you're drying it at. You'll want to put it in the same bag. That just keeps any residue that was in the bag before that you pulled out of the field, any of the nutrients or anything that stuck to the bag. That just keeps everything in your sample, so that way you don't lose nothing. After you get done drying it, you'll want to wrap it up in that bag. You'll want to do the same thing as we did when we transported it. You'll want to wrap it up as tight as you can and try to get all the air out of it. As you can see, there's still some moisture in it, in the bag. That's a good thing, because you don't want it dry. You don't want it dust. You still want moisture in it, because that's where a lot of your nutrients are. When the soil dries out, you're losing nutrients. And it messes with your sample. But the place, like I don't know about a lot of labs, but I know the lab that I haul to, or that I take all my samples to, a lot of times you can get online, and they've got, or on their website, online, same difference. You can get on their website, and they've got forms that you can print off at home or in the library or wherever you got a printer at. You can get a form printed off, and I downloaded the form to my phone, so that way I've always got it, because I'm doing multiple samples a year on my fields, just to check, make sure everything's okay. But you can get the form printed off, and on the form, it'll have your name, address, yada yada yada, and then you'll have field ID and what you're wanting done with your sample. Well, on my tags, I put a tag on all my samples. You can see this is 7.5 acres across creek. That's what I call this field. That's this sample. I can take the on the field ID where it says on the form for the field ID, I'll write 7.5 acres across creek on it, or I'll write the acreage and the farm number. Every farm has an ID number. So if you're farming or looking to farm or looking to cash rent ground, that's what this here is, off of our cash rented farm. For a lot of the stuff you use on that farm, you'll need the farm ID number. But I know what farm it's coming off of, so I just call it 7.5 acres across creek, because that's what it is, 7.5 acre field across creek. But you'll write that ID down on that form, and then it'll have little boxes. Set that down, I don't need to be holding that. It'll have little boxes on the form for your calcium, potassium, phosphorus, magnesium, whatever you're testing the soil for. I usually go with the lab that I use has multiple packages that you can get, and the like package 1, package 2, package 3. Package 1 is your basic soil sample. That just tells you what's in it. Package 2, it gives you a little more info, such as magnesium and a couple other things that I personally really don't pay any attention to. And then package 3, and that gives you every little detail you need to know about your sample. It's like the elite, but it's more expensive. So I usually go with package 1, package 2, depending on the field that I'm sampling and what crop I'm putting in that field. This farm here that I pulled these samples off of, I'm going to be putting corn in. So I'll probably go with package 2, just because, I want to get the best corn that I can get off of it. And corn pulls a lot of nutrients versus putting back like soybeans does. Lost my train of thought. The form. But anyway, on that form, you'll check them boxes of what you're wanting, what package you want, and what you're wanting to know more about. I'll be checking the calcium and phosphorus and potassium and magnesium of the fields. So when I go to fill out that form and I go to check them, they'll tell me what everything is, and it'll be associated with that farm ID number that I put on them. Well, it usually takes the lab that I deal with usually takes about a week to 2 weeks to get the information back to me, but they'll email it to me, and they send a paper copy, and it's only what it costs me to get samples done. I don't know what's going to cost any of you guys, but what it costs me is $6 a sample. So every sample I take to them, it costs me $6, which is very affordable, especially when you're covering, 30, 40 acres like I am. I'm just getting started. I've came up with our neighbor and fellow farmer just drove down the road, beeped his horn at me. I'm a small farmer, just getting started, but I've got about 40 acres now that I'm farming. So, yeah, it's when you're covering that much acreage, and then some of these guys that are farming 4,000 or 5,000 acres, and they're farmers that farm a lot more than that. When they do their soil samples, typically they don't do them themselves. They have whatever fertilizer company they're dealing with that it doesn't for them. But me, I like to do them myself. Saves me a little bit of money, and and I get the information back faster, and I also know what's going into my fields. I like to keep really good records and really good track of what's going into my fields and my input and output of the fields. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it as far as the soil samples go, and that's all we get into with them. So not much to it, pretty easy. Yeah.
Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to smash that like button and slam that subscribe, and make sure you hit that notification bell so that way you don't miss any of our future videos, and you get notified whenever they come out. That's pretty cool that YouTube's got that. If you have any questions or any comments, drop them down in the comment section, and look forward to making some more videos and showing you guys what we're doing on the farm. Yeah, the weather's just starting to get a little nicer. It's tail end of February, but the weather's starting to get a little nicer for us, so we're able to get we're able to do a little bit more now. The last few weeks have been really slow. We haven't been able to do much, so it's going to be really nice getting back into the swing of things. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you smash it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.